Welcome to Enchant Tea, a podcast dedicated to tea lovers. A cup of humanity. Tea comes from a mystical realm, boundless and bottomless. The Enchant Tea podcast celebrates the divine spirit of tea and the miraculous ways Camellia sinensis connects all of us. In each episode, you'll hear stories about tea and the meaningful connections she brings, from tea culture to her art and history. You'll be immersed in the boundless joy of the tea spirit. This podcast is presented by Nine Dragons Tea, an epic documentary unearthing the long-buried secrets and mysteries of the world's most popular drink after water. Hi, I'm Christy Hui, your host, fellow tea lover, writer, and director of Nine Dragons Tea. Sit down and let's enjoy this enchanting cup together. I want to first welcome our listeners to the show, and I have the pleasure and the privilege to speak with Roy Fong, a tea master and owner of the Imperial Tea Garden in San Francisco. And I wanted to share a cup of tea with Roy and hear some amazing tea stories. Roy and I like to share two common characteristics, one of which is that we both celebrate Chinese New Year, which is coming up, the Year of the Dragon. So, there's 1.5 billion of us in Chinese living around the world. So we're not so unique, but this is a fantastic holiday. And you and I can talk more about that because tea also started as a Southerners drink in China. And we are both Cantonese, Guangdongyan, right?
Correct.
So I had the pleasure when I first meet you to speak, pardon me.
See, that's what you get for not having a sip first.
Exactly. Always take your time. So it was such an amazing experience speaking with you in Cantonese that it puts me back to the roots. So thank you, Roy, for coming onto the show. So first, I'd like to have you do me the honor of introducing yourself to the audience.
Oh, thank you so much. So first of all, it's Imperial Tea Court in San Francisco.
Thank you. So that is the cue for you to repeat your name, Imperial Tea Court in San Francisco.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who has senior moments.
Thank you. I am drinking pu'er tea, so you talk about that.
So I'm Roy Fong from Imperial Tea Court. I have the privilege to be in the tea business for a little while now. I have been importing tea from China since the mid-1980s. I know some of you listening are probably not that old, not as old as the teas that I imported. And I opened the first Imperial Tea Court in San Francisco in 1993. And so we are approaching 30 years in the retail business. What got us going into the retail high-end tea business was that when I first started importing tea, I was the West Coast distributor for the Yunnan Tea Import-Export Corporation. So I started close to my root being Hong Kong, someone who was born in Hong Kong, where pu'er tea, as Cantonese call bolei, reigns supreme. Doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, or destitute, pu'er tea is like a lifeblood. It's almost like air you breathe. No matter who you are with, pu'er tea is served. So back when I was a kid, even poor people have access to good, somewhat aged pu'er. We all know pu'er tea was expensive even when I was a kid, but you can drink that even back then. Now, I haven't been a kid for a long time, So, so when I immigrated to the US at the age of 13, I didn't speak any English. I was 4'11" and 90 pounds. I didn't grow too much more than 4'11", but I did grow a lot sideways now. I'm significantly over 90 pounds. And having to learn English and trying to dive into the American culture, uh, everything was, I tried to sort of be as American as possible, sort of without anybody telling me that. And then everything at home is far away from my thought. But when I become 21, something flipped a switch in my head, and I decided to go back to Hong Kong for the first time. Of course, I had to be 21 at that time before I could afford to go back to Hong Kong. So, long story short, I spent almost a month in Hong Kong, spent all my lifetime saving, that short lifetime, and I discovered tea on that visit in Hong Kong. I was walking in a district where old tea shops and antique and old seafood places like that. That's very, if you're from there, you know what I mean. Hong Kong people cherish that kind of thing. So I was wandering the streets, and all of a sudden my nose caught this undescribable fragrance. I literally followed my nose into a tea shop where I found the owner of the tea shop doing the final roasting of his Tech Kuan Yin Oolong. I made friend with him. I spent the rest of my vacation going there every day practically, uh, becoming part of the shop there. Uh, when upon returning to the US, I threw all my clothes away and filled in a full two suitcases of teas, not tea bags, sorry. And when I returned home, I was very anxious to show off all the tea I acquired, and not knowing that this is eventually to become, my life. So I become a pretty serious tea drinker, but nothing more. And then in 1991, a person from China came to US to visit. We were doing import exporting business at that time. And she said, I really like to work with you. What can we do together? And I said, I've always wanted to do a wheel tea shop. And with her help, we were able to bring one 40-foot container of material and 6 workmen from China to build our first original Imperial Tea Court right on the edge of Chinatown. Uh, I don't know what hit me. I was brave enough to sign a 15-year lease with the owner. And after we finished building the tea shop, I've never had any retail experience. I've never done anything similar to that. And not realizing, working with a group of workmen from China who has a total different idea of what work is and what collaboration is and what money really mean. It took 2 years to build a tea shop. We have to send them home and hire another crew here to finish the job. And it was my father, who was a contractor, came out of retirement to help me to finish a shop. I was destitute after the shop closed. I had to pay my partner off, and the 6 workmen who came turned out to be leaders in their company. They hadn't done any damn work for years. And so they came, the first thing they say was, how many help are you going to hire for me? And I said, but it's 1,000 square foot, there's six of you. And they said, well, yeah, but we supervise, we don't work, Anyway, so from there, I had to make things work pretty quickly. And we opened officially on July 4th, 1993. the reason for July 4th was not only for patriotism, but I know all my friends have that day off. They better come and support me.
Good
So the day,
customers coming in. Uh-huh.
right, the day, like a week before opening, I flew to Hong Kong with $200 in my pocket, one Visa card, and no more money. So I went to a wholesaler I know, spoke to them, and said, "Look, I don't have any money now. I'd like to buy some tea from you, but I would like you to give me some time to pay." And then they said, "Okay." I was a little shocked, but and then they were shocked after they agreed, and I give the list of tea I like to have, that how much I demanded, for some young kid coming here telling my old 60-year-old roaster, tea roasting master, how he's not, firing the taekwondo correctly. So I didn't make any friends, but I think they probably just want to get rid of me. So they gave me 2 cases of tea, and it's at that time it's only total. I said only, but at that time it was a pretty big amount for me. The 2 cases is about $600 or $700. So I flew home, with my ticket arriving on July 2nd. July 2nd, and then went, well, July 3rd, actually, the day before. So I arrived with United Airlines and early in the morning on July 3rd, and waited at the luggage belt until everybody else is gone. I don't see my 2 cases. So I went to United Airlines, still, full of hope. And after, you know, about 10 minutes, they looked at me and said, "Mr. Fong, I'm sorry to inform you, your luggage is in Tokyo." But I said, "But I'm opening tomorrow." So anyway, my wife was waiting to pick me up outside, and 2 hours later, I walked out of the terminal almost in tears. So I didn't sleep all night, and I'm at 6:30 a.m. in the morning, where I'm still thinking, how am I going to tell the 50 people I badger into coming for my opening? United Airlines called me and said, "Mr. Fong, we got your packages. Where should we deliver it?" I was floored. So they delivered the packages by 8. I was able to open with tea that I just got in from Hong Kong, and all my friends chipped in. I did like $300 of business that day. So I said to my wife, "Okay, you and me work for free, and the rent's 1,000 and change. We could do this, So we opened officially from that day. Next day, my wife and I came in and opened the door, waiting for customer, and waited half a day. Nobody came in. Uh, then an old lady uh, kind of come in slowly, reluctantly, and look at, I swear, every single item we have this in display on the store. And then she wagged her fingers at me and said, "Do you know how much they're selling these down in Chinatown? You're crazy. If you're my son, I'd kill you." So so anyway, I thought, all right, one old lady, what the hell? It was not until almost 3 months later, we finally had our first $100 day. And I was so ecstatic. I took my wife out to dinner and spent that $100 in like 2 blinks of the eyes. And then after that, something miraculously happened. The San Francisco Chronicle showed up and said, "You are doing something really unique. We like to do a little, interview with you and maybe write about you." And she said, "Maybe," but I was, very happy, obviously. And so she interviewed me. We had tea. She spent like over 2 hours drinking tea with me. And then she left, and I thought that was it. A week later, a full page story about us happened in the San Francisco Chronicle food page. And then ever since then, we started to climb the ladder a little bit. And then eventually I have articles in the New York Times and the Gourmet magazine, Bon Appetit, the first 10 years or so of our business, it was pretty amazing. People come from all over the world to that little shop to talk tea, to just glean a little bit of the real Chinese tea culture. Well, at least I like to consider it real. And a group of old men came in shortly after the article, and they said, "We've been looking for a place like this to bring our songbirds." So I said, "Come on in," So every Saturday, a group of old men, Chinese old men, bring their cage birds and they hang it up on the lattice work we have in the store. And they take up one table, they laugh, they drink tea, they argue, they lie to each other, just like all old men do. So it was wonderful. And this really unique tea culture have started. And I like to claim that we're probably the only authentic tea shop, Chinese tea shop in the US at the time. Now, obviously, other people have sold tea before me. The Chinese obviously did a lot of tea business before me, but uh, the Chinese tea culture, like tea shops, with the proprietors supposed to have something to do with every tea that they procure. Like so we start making our signature monkey pick tea. From that first day I spent in Hong Kong, and we roast our own monkey pick tea when it get our own oolongs here until today. Um, we did a lot of things that little people have no business doing. Like I would go to China to to supervise production of our Lotus Hot Dragon Well. We never stopped that until recently. So I think I could take up the rest of the hour if I wanted to, but that's
This
the
is
long
why,
story short. That's how we started.
well, thank you, Roy. This is why I love Tea Masters and talking with my fellow tea people, because I only asked you one question. And look at so thank you for that fascinating tea branch. Your story is like the tea branches and it wraps around. And I think that's why I love tea so much, because everyone have their mystical beginning. And it's like you were guided by tea
Right,
herself, the
absolutely.
destiny. And I have so many questions for you just because of that story. One, if I hear correctly, it was pu'er tea that got you first started,
Right,
but it was Tie Guan Yin, which is a famous oolong tea that
right,
got you hooked. Am I
right.
correct?
Both count. I think poverty is in my blood. Being
That's
born
right.
and grow up in Hong Kong,
Yes.
I a lot of people always ask me, "What your favorite tea is?" And I would say pu'er, and they said, "Why?" And I had this kind of soul search. I love Tequanyin, especially the old traditional Tequanyin, where the tea is actually oxidized to at least 30% and a good roast of the tea where the roasting of the tea make or break the tea, but also show technique beyond people's comprehension. So I have to think why. And the simple reason is whenever I have to make a decision on what tea do I want to drink, or sometimes I don't even realize I'm making a decision, it's always pu'er because I think I grew up with that stuff. I drank that more than water when I was young. That's what we always drink when people show up in the house. Being from Hong Kong, I just don't know any better.
I
So,
drink,
so
yeah, I think that I love pu'er now. It was funny because when I was a kid, I grew up watching my father drinking his gong fu cha. And one
uh,
time he was drinking really, really dark tea. And and I tasted it. I'm like, whoa, this is like medicine. And I said, what is it? He says, oh, it's pu'er.
Mhm.
And it was like, ooh, it, you know, but I was a girl, young girl then. It was like, this is old man tea. So I always related pu'er as a old man tea. But until recently, um, because of the amazing health benefits and tasting pu'er at your events,
Uh,
that was brilliant. But I love to hear more about your pu'er. Yes, I think in Hong Kong, every Chinese restaurant that you go to, Sunday dim sum, right? And it's like, okay, bo lei cha,
right.
right?
I mean, there's poor and there's poor, So,
I like how
so
you say that poor is also for, cuts across all demographics.
right.
The poor people use poor, and there's the poor.
Well, I tell you, some of us were lucky enough to choose tea. Those of us who are extraordinarily lucky, tea chose you. So I think I'm one of the extraordinarily lucky person where tea chose me. So I would encourage you guys to read my book. It's not unfortunately available anywhere else except in my website because I basically wrote that book to just get it off my chest. One of the most asked questions I get is, why aren't you writing a book? So this is my revised version. This is the second book. In it, it tells
Okay.
you the story about how I become this crazed tea person that I am today. Almost
Roy, what is
shameless.
the title of your book?
The Great Teas of China.
Oh, okay. It's
Yeah,
available on your
so
website. What is your website? Oh, we'll provide that.
imperialtea.com.
Okay. Oh, you
Yeah.
skipped the chords. Okay. Imperialtea.com.
Yeah, just
Okay.
Imperial Tea.
Okay.
It's about the tea, not about me.
I will definitely get a copy. I did not know that. Thank you for sharing that, by the way,
Thank
Roy.
you. So in terms of pu'er, I think we were discussing, the difference in pu'er. So you could go to dim sum restaurant where they serve you so-called pu'er that, you just hope that it's not too bad. And sometimes they don't even, they don't even clean the pot they used previously. So you could have other tea like jasmine and what else it tastes. And there's pu'er tea that's worth thousands of dollars a pound. I've sold aged pu'er back to China for significant amount of money. So in the book also, it's we only have an hour, so so the short story about pu'er tea is that there's two style, the Sun style and the Shou style. Uh, the Sun style is pu'er tea that's from green tea and oxidized with air, slowly aged, and hopefully it'll eventually turn reddish. And when it turn red, then it's become very expensive. And there's the other version where that's like a green tea, made with green tea, like a green tea, but water's added to the tea to encourage fermentation. So in tea terms, we always say fermentation, but what people really mean is oxidization, not fermentation. But pu'er tea is fermentation, where you add water to encourage bacteria grow, and it changes into like a mold, and then the mold attacks the tea leaf and change the dynamics inside. And then after it dry off, some of the bacteria is still dormant in the tea. And then pu'er tea, this type of pu'er tea is called shou. In Cantonese is stok. It is alive.
Ripe, yeah, ripe pu'er.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and some people quote unquote say cook.
Cooked, yeah,
Yeah, I don't like that word. It had nothing to do with it.
me too.
So is more correct. So
Yes.
so people, collectors like us, we look at this type of pu'er, well, all pu'er in general, as a living being. So you interact with a living being, you have to learn the likes and dislike of the other person if you want to be friends. So in my book again, it explained a little bit about how to encourage bacteria grow at the appropriate time and discourage it at appropriate time. So a puer that's very old already, you don't want bacteria grow again because the bacteria has to feed on something. So over fermented puer turns really dark. When you brew the tea, it almost looks like chocolate, and it become very light in color. The cup become very light in color, and there's no flavor. And then the next sipping, there'll be nothing. Well-aged puer is very dark red, and at least you try to get it to be very dark red. And the leaf is still pliable, and that does not turn black. So black soul puer and sun puer is two different animals, although they're the same. I have sun puer. That's one of the advantages we have here in the U.S., or at least in my part of the U.S., is that we don't have high humidity here, but we do have fluctuation of temperature. So I deliberately do not put insulation on the roof of my warehouse. So the
So let me
younger
pause for a second, Roy. So you have your own warehouse and you are fermenting or oxidizing,
I'm
producing
aging.
your puer.
Right, I'm aging my
Wow.
puer.
Okay.
You're looking at someone that had over 40 tons of puer all the time. I buy every year.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Do you
Yeah.
actually travel to Yunnan?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
I have
this-
great friends there, when we have time, I tell you the story of my first visit to Yunnan.
please
It's
do. Because
yeah,
Roy, coming up is I don't know if you heard of this book called The Tea Girl from Hummingbird Lane
I
by
believe so.
Lisa
Yeah.
C. In fact, I'm doing a tea book club, and we are
Ah,
going to share our
right.
thoughts on this book. And I love the story, and it's featuring poor prominently. And I've started to learn about Yunnan puer tea after I met you, and I was just
Yeah.
fascinated by it. I didn't
Oh,
even
yeah.
know that the type of puer tea is
Mm.
actually caffeine free.
Uh,
So yeah, they're just so fascinating. A tea type by itself, because you and we Chinese know that there are six traditional Chinese tea type, and pu'er tea is by itself, it's
yeah,
a tea type, but it's a rule unto itself. And
right.
so, yes, I love for you to share more about your pu'er tea
Yeah.
aging and production.
For those of you who have never been to Yunnan, that is a magical place. Where even today, the oldest living tea tree is over 1,800 years old. You could still walk up to it and look at it and touch it. It's a protected, sort of local treasure. But there's no place else on earth where you find live tea tree that's in such abundance, and several 100-year-old tea trees abounds. And people pick tea from them still the old way. They climb up to the tree and they pick tea. Although the popularity and value of pu'er tea, I believe, harms the quality and the sort of tradition uh, of how it always been produced. Yunnan back in the Yunnan means the southern clouds. It's so insinuate that it's a very high area where you reach for the cloud. So and it's such a unique place where it's a high altitude area, but it's almost like a valley. So people find prehistoric plants there that they still can name. They still find things there. This is probably the only place. Well, this is the only place in China where you still find wild elephants. So it's a tremendous place. And the way that this tea is produced is not really a lot of techniques required. Like making a great dragon well needs great techniques from picking to pan firing to refiring to storage to brewing. Every one of those steps are important. If the tea master make a great tea, you and I could totally screw that up by, putting half a cup of tea leaf and put some boiling water in it. It'll be so bitter, it'll throw you out the window. So, but with pu'er tea, it's almost all natural. So you don't even worry about just the tips and this and that. It's wild. So the local minority groups pick them and basically sun dry them in the ancient time. Uh, this is a major difference between other tea production and Yunnan pu'er tea production. The final drying is not by forced heat, it's by sun dry. So sun dry is not as intense as or as close as direct fire. So the bacteria that's within the leaf can continue to live, and it retains a little bit higher moisture content because it's a big leaf. It has a lot of moisture, and sun drying doesn't completely bake it out. So the bacteria is able to survive, and the added moisture sometimes let it help it remold. So that's why where I come in, where do you let it remote or not remote at all? So that's where the so-called store your tea in the cave idea come in, because in the cave it's a lot of humidity and moisture, and the tea will mold again and get that unique earthiness. But there is a point of too much molding, and also people, misconception is molding, and that moldy taste means it's old. I could produce mold for you in a week, and that's how some of them make kind of I don't want to say fake, but they doctor the tea to make it taste older. A good, well fermented pu'er should taste earthy, almost like clean soil, but not moldy and powdery like mildew. So you need to kind of understand that. And there are some teas that will benefit from another mode, another fermentation, because the first fermentation it went through might not be enough. So that accelerate that aging and add more bacteria. But if you're not careful, that bacteria will go rampant and the tea be no good. So
It's a balance. Mhm.
yeah. So even though it's not a lot of technical. So if you've been to Yunnan and you've been to, say, Hangzhou, where the dragon well is produced, and you look at the cuisine and look at the people, they're vastly different. Not that one is more beautiful than the other. The style is so different. And that's why the tea is so different. So I used to take people to China on a tea and culinary culture tour. So the first thing I asked them to do is when you get off the plane, start looking around you and record everything in your head. How the people look, how they sound, how the foliage look like, how the leaf look like. And they'll discover from Hangzhou, the leaves are lighter green, smaller leaves on the tree, and people are more delicate.
Delicate, yeah.
The food is more sweeter, less intense. As you go to south, to Fujian, to Yunnan, everything is dark green. The leaves are bigger, and the food become more simpler but more intense in flavor. When you go to Yunnan, it's spicy and strong and just like the land.
Yes, it matches the land produces, and it's like that's why we talk about the terroir, just like in
Right.
France, right? And wine, and you drink local wine, and it matches with the local cuisine. So I love that when I was tasting pu'er tea with you in your specialty tasting, it really opened my eyes about the different types of pu'er that, like you said, there's pu'er and there's pour and there's pour, right? And how, given how big really Pour has been growing, it's a cult, like there's a cult-like following. I mean, expensive Pour tea can go as high as what, Roy?
So just for example, I sold some 1989 Menghai tea cakes to China to a good friend of mine for $2,000 per piece.
Per
One piece
cake?
per cake, yeah. So one cake is 357 gram, slightly less than a pound. So I thought I did pretty well. I only paid $4 a kilo when I bought it years ago. But he turns around and sell it for almost 10, like almost 100,000 yuan. So divided by seven, significantly more than 2,000. So this is a little bit like antique. There's no set price. If you want, if for those who like it and appreciate it and can afford it, the price almost doesn't matter because every time you break down one of them, there's one less in the world. Very seldom people have tea that are that old, really. So one of my first cardinal rule in purchasing for, or even antique, I'm not a big antique guy, but I love them. It's first rule number one, stop telling me stories. I don't want to hear the story. I just want to taste the tea for what it is. And from my own understanding of how the tea and I communicate, how do I like them, how it seem like they like me back. And if the price is acceptable to me, I don't really care what other people buy it for. I buy and I walk away. I don't ever go back and double check, and I'm happy with it that way. And then from that point on is me and that tea. So that's my only one cardinal rule is don't listen to stories, listen to your heart and let the chips fall where they may. Don't do things that you can't afford. Like obviously, like your mom always tell you, don't be crazy and buy things you shouldn't. Like if it's something you have no idea about, even though you like it, it's a big number. You probably shouldn't do it unless you're one of those who could afford to do, like, I don't know, you're a big basketball player or something. If you make 100 million, somebody wants 100,000 from you, you probably think it's some change. But those of us who have to fight to make $100, we're pretty careful with our money. We don't let our vanity or a story confuse us because we're confused enough as it is.
So now, one of the things that you shared with us during the Pour tea tasting was your way of being one with the tea.
Right.
Would you like to say that? It really resonated with me, Roy.
Well, it's a communication because if you look at that tea as a living being, what do you do when you meet someone else? You talk
Say
to each other,
hello.
communicate,
Yeah.
right? So remember when I pour water in and rinse the leaf out, I explain that as and the fragrance of the tea, I show everyone. I tell them that's your first hello between you and the tea. That fragrance tells you everything about itself, where it come from, how old it is, how it was produced, which region it come from, and probably how you're gonna be rewarded if you treat it this way or that way. It's giving you all the answer. But it's speaking in a different language than you usually do. So you have to kind of decipher that and then understand what signal you're receiving and then act accordingly. This connection is like making art. It's like painting. Nobody should tell you when you go paint, every time you should use a 4x4 canvas and with 3 colors and only 45 strokes. You can't make art that way. You have to release yourself, listen to you and listen to everything around you in this case, including the tea and the people around you. And then you try to communicate and you try to see what you do if you get a positive response, right? A non-positive response will be astringency or water tastes like water or like
Mold.
moldy tasting, So all these things is, you know, it sounds complicated, but it really isn't, because those of you who are wine drinkers out there, we look for the same thing. If you're a wine drinker, you look for the nose, you look for the color, you look for the legs, you look for the depth
The
of
coat, tail.
the,
Yeah.
the clarity.
Mhm.
Everything's the same, except you don't get to affect the final outcome as much with wine. So what's already done is in the bottle. When you serve it, you're
Mhm.
only left with what temperature you should be serving this at, what kind of glass makes a huge difference. Do you pair with the correct type of food or not? But you're not making the wine stronger or lighter. With tea, your participation determine the final outcome of your encounter by adjusting temperature, using different tasting water, using the more tea, less amount of tea, how you place your tea in your pot or in your cup, how you pour your water, how long you let it steep, how you let it steep, how you pour it out, and then finally, how do you drink it with what kind of cup? You have so much influence to make it so much different. And
It's a
so
dance. It's like
absolutely,
yeah, it's a dance and you are speaking. That's one thing I love about talking with you is that the language of tea that you're speaking and together you're creating this dance and this and I love the fact that the pu'er tea is actually live.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so you brought on so many wonderful little questions I have, and due to time, we're going to have to have
Right,
another session, Roy,
right.
because I want to ask you something. If someone listening to the podcast and they really, really want to start drinking pour, how do they start? What do they look for? What's the best way to go about it?
Well, I mean, there's no better way than just trying, number one, and again, there's so much chatter today with internet and everybody pounding their chest to, about how good they are, which is very anti-Chinese. We always believe that when you're good, people will find out. When you have to say you're good, then you probably still need a little work. Tea is one art that you're not going to finish in one lifetime. Just I don't care who you are.
Mhm.
So it's a ongoing process, and your truth is a little different than my truth because, like for example, you come from Hunan or something, you eat very spicy food. The way you want to enjoy your tea will be very different than someone who come from like Shanghai, because the culinary culture is very different. So don't let people force you to do things this way or that way. I kind of, I'm the anti-rules guy. All my life, I don't really like to follow what people tell me unless I understand it the same way that was told to me. So I would say, listen to yourself. And again, like I said, don't listen to the stories just because of the story. If you don't agree, don't be afraid to say so. And then try it. Try to get your tea from a reputable vendor. At some point, you're gonna have to develop trust with the person who provide you with the tea. And no, going directly to China to buy tea is not always give you the best deal. My advice to people is when you go to Hangzhou, don't buy Dragon Well. You go to Yunnan, don't run into the shop and buy a bunch of Yunnan pu'er, because the chances of you getting great pu'er is not as great as you think. So find somebody you can trust, preferably somebody that allow you to sample, taste, and there's somebody that could explain in a way you can understand, and this is just personal. If somebody said you make your tea this way and only this way, so many seconds, so many minutes, I myself have a problem with that, because again, your preference is different than my preference. I would take somebody who give me directions like that. I'll take their advice and try it for myself, and then I'll explore other options to see if that really worked for me. If it doesn't, I'm not afraid to say no.
Mhm. It's an individual experience with the tea, and so don't be afraid to to meet tea
Right?
and
Don't be,
communicate. Mhm,
don't be afraid to disagree,
mhm.
because I've been in tea tastings where I don't want to say, but the person is well known, and so they're describing flavors that I simply don't believe is there. But obviously, I wasn't going to stand up and say no. But but I would, I think everybody should be respected to when they're sharing their understanding and knowledge. Maybe you agree or not agree, that's okay. But I don't think direct confrontation it's respectful. I
So
think
Roy, I have
there's
a question. I have a question.
yeah.
How, when you're going to, let's say you're one of your sourcing trip in Yunnan and trying to buy tea,
Mhm.
is, you are obviously tasting and communicating with tea. What other qualifications are you looking for?
Well, I think the person you deal with is important, because ultimately that's a people's business. So you have to trust each other. And I gotta tell you, over 30 years of importing tea, I rarely ever have to pay ahead of time. The tea gets shipped to me, it gets into my warehouse, I pay them. If I find anything wrong, they'll take care of me. So it tells you that there's a pretty deep trust between me and my suppliers. Now, but also I have a fortunate advantage, because in the early days, I actually, in order to make better tea, I went to the farm where the tea is grown, and I worked the entire harvest with them. So I know what happened when you pick the tea during rainy day, or you pick the tea during good weather days. If you pick it this with cut it with a knife, for example, or cut it with a machine, or you pick it with tea, pick it with your hands, what the differences are. During each process, each step of the process, it affects the next step. So by knowing the entire process, I knew the finished product is lacking this or that. So I could tell them, for example, your rolling process is not enough, because if you don't roll it enough, you don't break the cellular structures within the leaf, flavors don't release. So your rolling is not enough, then you won't develop full flavor. The oxidation won't happen correctly. So I could tell them so they could adjust on the next day, because harvests come in every day, and you could tell when the tea's picked in the rainy day, it won't taste, the flavor is a lot less.
So when in pu'er tea, do you also roll or knead?
Yeah, yes, you
You
have to
do?
roll.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you pan fire to cook the leaf, so to stop the rawness, but also you cook through the leaf so it stops any further oxidation. And then it also make it soft and pliable, that allow you to roll it. If you don't cook through it and you roll it, you break the leaf. So if you
What
overcook it,
process? Mhm. Sorry, go ahead. If you
go ahead.
overcook the leaves?
If you go overcook the leaf, it'll burn. It tastes burnt, and it'll be too dry. You can't roll it. So It's just you miss that, your rolling won't be correct. So, and then the rolling has to be done intermittently. That means you can't roll it for 3 hours because you break it off. So you roll it when the rolling create heat. When it's too hot, you have to stop. You have to break the ball, the leaves apart, let it cool off, and roll again. So this is all by eyes. They have not discovered a computer better than the one you got between your ears. You know, it's by eye, by touch, by smell. That's how we do it.
Mhm. What's your
So,
favorite part of the process, Roy?
my favorite part is when they're done, I get to drink it.
Speaking as a true tea enthusiast.
You know,
Yes.
so I remember the first time I tried to make Dragon Wow. Now, this is several years after I become, you know, a professional tea merchant. So I was there, and I thought I knew a lot about this already. And I saw this little girl pan firing the tea for me. So I was telling her this and that and giving direction. And finally, I told her, move aside, let me do it, you know, because although I never done it, I just thought it doesn't look so hot, you know. So I said, move aside, let me do it. She looks like 15, you know. So I sat down there. Within 3 seconds, I burned my hand, you know, and my right palm, half of it is completely blistered. But everybody, like 20 people, is watching me, so I had to finish it. So I finished it, and I did a terrible job, and my hand is completely burned. So I slowly stood up and I said, "Oh, maybe you should finish it." And then I walk against the wall and try to put my hand on the window to try to cool it off. And everybody so politely could pretend not to see that, you know. So
That
that gave me,
that giant walk that you use your hand to
yeah,
like do this,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Oh
You
my
have to
God,
press hard on the wall. The only thing keeping your hand from being cooked are those shrinking tea leaves, and they shrink like fast.
and that
So,
walk is hot. It can get
oh
up to
yeah,
420
it's
degrees
120 degrees
Fahrenheit.
Celsius, you
Yes,
know?
yes.
Yeah, I mean, so that gave me renewed respect for the people who did that. I just realized that moment that girl has more tea running through her blood than I ever will be. You know, because for maybe 6 or 7 generations, that's all they did. They come out of the womb knowing how to do this stuff. You know, and then after I burned my hand and I looked and I realized the intricacy of every single movement she's doing without thinking, because she's reacting to what the tea's telling them. You know, if it's shrinking, you know, you use a different technique so you don't burn your hand, but you got to keep the tea moving all the time so it doesn't get burned. It's a real art. So I think to really honestly answer your question, just watching the art happen live is my biggest thrill. And every step of the way is a different thrill. You know, I remember making oolong tea in Taiwan with my friend. I went there at after dinner, about 9 o'clock. So the teas are being rolled, and you work all the way through until the next morning. So every step of the production, after they finish pan firing, I'll grab a handful. We'll go back in the office. We'll cup that tea when it's pan firing. So pan before it's completely done is very bitter, and you could taste the difference as each production go on. The beginning of the method, the rolling, to the end of the rolling is a completely different tea. So that is, I think I even mentioned that in my book. That's the biggest tea lesson in my life. Understanding each production technique and step and how it affects the flavor. The only way you could tell is that you drink it on each step. So I did that through the night. And then the next morning, I went through picking with them. And I came out of that farm a new person.
It's very intense, a laborious process, and also sequential. Like you said, you can't miss a step. And when one step is finished, and you got to go to the next step. And it's when I was in Wuyishan, witness having the tea master talk about their oolong tea making
Right.
process. It was a 2-week intensive
Right.
each batch, and it was like night and day, 24/7, like you
Right.
said.
It's not something, a lot of people make tea because they need to make a living. Only a few people are very good at what they do, and they make it because they can't help it. If you just love it, that's not enough. You just can't help yourself.
Mhm.
No one can pay you to make excellent tea. Only you can make excellent tea, and you're doing it not even by choice. You just can't help it.
You know, yeah, I have to agree with you, and so much in that way that what I talk about after my journey of making the tea movie and watching the tea masters, and I'm so grateful to be talking with you because you remind me, and you reminded me of that journey that I went through, that it was a tea spirit. It's to make good tea, you have to be a good person, that moral character, and be one with tea because you're learning from each other, you're communicating. So, and this tea master making 11, he's an 11th generation of oolong tea master, and he puts it this way. He said, tea making is a limitless art, which hearing from you is the same message, isn't it, Roy?
Yeah, there's, the tea culture as we know today came from millions and millions and millions of people's wisdom in combination and thousands of years of progression to make it what it is. So if you and I are lucky enough to live a healthy 100 years, it's just a speck of time in terms of history. So it's just not enough time to learn everything. It's not possible. And you could consider it an art. Which art is you could finish learning? It is an art because it's unending. You learn from yourself, you learn from others, you learn from just be. So I just, I just can't be more grateful than I am today because of tea. Every success I have in life, it's because of tea. Until I found tea, I was just floundering. And tea gave me a sense of purpose. I give me self-respect. It take me to places I never thought possible. I meet great people like you and others, and and sometimes you even get paid for it. I don't know what else do you want in life.
What is in, if you can put the tea spirit into one sentence, what would that be?
Hmm. In one sentence, tea spirit.
Uh-huh. And you said so many wonderful things, like
Right.
tea changed your life, and how
I think
tea. Uh-huh.
I think for me, it's tea is life. If you just live your life like you treat your tea, you're probably gonna be okay. It
Beautiful.
will change, and the famous thing that Bruce Lee say, be like water,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yes.
be like
Yes.
tea.
Be like tea.
Tea is water. It could be anything you want.
Mhm.
And there's a level of tea for every human being. It doesn't, nobody should belittle anyone who wants to milk a tea bag or drink Earl Grey tea or whatever, because that's the level that suits them. Nobody should be uppity. And in fact, the only time in my life I fired someone. I fired 3 people in my whole life. I'm in business since I'm 21-year-old. They forced me, okay? The only person I ever fired in tea was this person who gave people a bad face when they come in asking for Earl Grey. And I walked him aside and I said, listen, you can't do that. I don't like that. If you think they're beneath you, then maybe you should find another job. Nobody's beneath you or above you. We should be respectful to others, for their choices, but also for what they prefer. You know, who the hell are you? So he didn't really took that warning seriously, and I had to fire him. You know, I've never done that to any. I mean, we're Chinese. You know how it is. We
Yes.
find having to confront someone to tell them they're not doing their job, it's very difficult to us.
Yes. Yes.
Because we're imagining somebody doing that to us. That's such a huge loss of faith.
Mhm.
You know, so you're supposed to understand it's really time for you to exit so that we could avoid having to confront each other. But this is
Mhm.
not very American. Americans want you to come out. Well, you don't like it. Why didn't you tell me?
Yeah. Yeah. To lean in and say, hey, I'm here. Give it to
Yeah.
me. Give it to me. Yes.
So
I
I'm
think
practically born here, but I still have this problem. I came here when I was 13. I'm 68 now. I've been here for a long time, but I
Yeah.
still have difficulty, being quote unquote American sometimes.
Well, being a tea person, also I find that tea brings out the harmonious nature, and tea is it's a harmonious entity, and
Right.
it brings us internal harmony with each other, and that's I always say, tea is a cup of humanity, and you nailed it in every like your stories just confirms and affirms all that, and I have after my making the tea film, I have so much more respect. I mean, I have a lot of respect before for tea. But there's so how it is that Roy that it takes time for you to see.
Right.
And for me, that represents tea so much.
Absolutely.
And it teaches us how to be better humans, in my opinion.
Right.
Better
Well,
people.
I certainly have become a better human being, at least in my opinion. Sometimes my wife don't actually agree, but
Ask your wife that, yes.
but I
That's great.
certainly, I think, I came from Hong Kong at 13. When I went back to China, to Hong Kong at 21, I barely can read a newspaper anymore. I only have a sixth grade education in Hong Kong, and I wasn't a very good student. I remember when they say, "Oh, we're applying to bring you guys up to the US." I go, "Oh, no more school." Put that year off. So, so uh, because of tea, certainly because of tea, I'm a lot more cultured in terms of Chinese. I not only can read a newspaper, I even read poetry. It's shocking,
Oh, while you're
and
sipping your tea and you're like reciting poetry.
but there's so many poetry about tea.
Oh, that's right.
I
Right.
quoted 3 of them in my book.
Can you please recite for our audience? And I love to hear you recite your favorite tea poem.
Well, there's
Can
a
you do that?
poem about oolong tea.
Okay.
It's the final sentence is 家家買龍半年陳. That means everybody show off their aged tea from last year. And this is surprisingly not about Pu'er. It's about the place you came from. That you make your film. It's about
Wu Yi tea.
Wu Yi tea.
Yeah.
Because the traditional method of Wu Yi tea is to make the tea this year, save it until next year, and refire before you sell. So it says 火氣未難馴未接塵. That means that the firing 火氣 means the firing energy. 未除 means hasn't been removed. 莫接塵, do not let it touch your lips.
Yeah.
So that means freshly roast tea, don't drink it. So like my standard practice is still fire 2 weeks prior to I sell it, and then let it cool off the almost like you barbecue and let the meat rest, right?
Sit. Yeah. Let the meat sit. Yeah.
Right. So with roasting tea, you let the tea set so that it could reabsorb some moisture around it, so that it's some of the toasty, fiery taste. And to Chinese, it's not just the taste, it's the energy.
Mhm.
You need that to be
We
proportion
energize
and
the
balance.
leaves. Mhm.
Yeah. Then,
Mhm.
you know, so for Haymaker Lantern Mock Gypsum, that means before the firing energy is gone, do not touch. So
Can you
it's in
text
my
me
book.
that line, that poem?
Yeah.
I'd love to include it. That's so great. There's 400 poems that celebrates Wu Tea, or actually we Chinese has so many poems, right, about tea. She's a
And
major
Wuisan,
star.
this, if you go
Yes.
up to Wuisan, they're halfway on the side of the mountain, everywhere. You know, you can't
Along,
help but learn.
yes, along the river. It is so amazing, the tea culture.
I can encourage people to go to Wuisan more. I mean, if it's already changed so much, not for the better, unfortunately, but that the Wuisan is one of the 36 portal to immortality for Taoists. And if you go there, you know why.
Yeah,
Every turn is just
the
not of this world
temples.
beautiful.
Yeah, there are so many temples that we shot, and we had to scale up the mountains to shoot those temples, the Taoist temples, the Buddhist temples. Now, I knew you told me that earlier, when we met, Roy, that you were a Taoist.
Correct. Yeah. I'm from the Ching Chung Taoist Association of America. I'm the first quote unquote priest in America for that temple. So
Wow.
I learned that. So I believe major direction in your life is pre-planned. You know, you could do anything you want, whatever you want. You could change small direction, but you end up to that direction eventually. So I learned Tai Chi, and then I learned Buddhism, I Taoism, It- and I learned Tea, Tai Chi, and Taoism in that order. And it only can happen when that period of time. I got into a very bad car accident, and I wasn't able to work for almost 6 months. So I don't know if you're running out of time, but long story short, a
We have
friend
time,
called
yeah.
me up. A friend called me up and said, "Roy, let's go to dinner." I said, "Okay." I haven't seen this guy forever, and so he came to my house, picked me up. We went to Chinatown for dinner, and just couldn't find a parking space anywhere. So I told him, wherever we park, we just go to the closest restaurant. And after I said that, within seconds, we found this huge, big parking space on Grand Avenue. We pulled in and we walk across the street. It's a vegetarian restaurant. And I didn't know at the time that it's customary to be a vegetarian at least on your birthday, because that's the day you get life. So you don't take life on that day. I did not know that. Okay, so we walk into the restaurant, and I did not know that's in the Chinese calendar. That was my birthday. My birthday is the January 15th in Chinese calendar. Uh, in Western calendar is February 26th. So I did not know that was January 15th. And I did not know January 15th is the first festival, first important day of the year. It's called Shem Yun Dan. This is where the gods come down to give good fortune to people. So I did not know that. So I went to the restaurant. We ate vegetarian. Halfway through, I needed to go to the bathroom, and I went upstairs, not knowing that the second floor is the Taoist temple. I woke up
Oh, wow.
and I forgot to go to the bathroom because the sounds they're making was so fascinating. And there's a group of people there waiting, watching. So went and I watched, and they were performing the star praising ceremony. Traditionally, the first such ceremony is performed in January 15th, the Seong Dan. That's the so the Taoists believe that everybody belongs to a star system. So your star system is bright and energetic, you will be in good fortune. The really special people have their own stars. So praising the star and try to align yourself with positive energy is what that ceremony. And I didn't know that. So I met the priest there, and they're a couple, and they asked me to come back. And long story short, I ended up living with them for 2 years. Because at that time, in the beginning, I wasn't working. So I spent a month learning. So I was a sixth grade educated person that hadn't spoken Chinese for a long time, way Chinese. And I had to learn scriptures and incantations and talismans that are like 2-inch thick books. I learned that in a little over a year. They said that nobody had ever done that, on top of you not being literate in Chinese. So it only could happen because I lived with them for the 2 years. And it only could happen because they let me live with them. I become like their third son. So that, and then
It's amazing.
because Tai Chi and Taoism, it teaches me a lot of things about energy and movement and position and balancing. And I put all that into my tea when I make tea. And I believe that's what caused me to be a different tea person. And I could direct my energy into the tea I'm making because I'm communicating. So that's why the tea to me tastes better to me. Of course, my little vanity going up again, but yeah, this life of mine has been very interesting, and almost everything is pointed towards tea. So I said earlier, some of us who are lucky enough, are fortunate enough, tea chose you.
Yeah.
I really believe tea chose me. I
Yeah.
did not have any idea. None of these things that I described, I knew beforehand. I did not know that on my birthday every year they do the star praising ceremony for me. And I become part of the temple. So the 10 years or so I spent being active in the temple, every birthday that I'm doing the star praising ceremony for myself and everybody. I mean, if that's not destiny, I don't know what is.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I can taste that, like you say, in the energy when we were doing the pour tea tasting, and you were so generous with the tasting, the flight. It was spectacular. I definitely taste that earthiness. I don't know if it's your energy because I didn't know that you were making it then. But it was exquisite pour tea. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I definitely feel like I met you, I think, when I walk into your Imperial Tea Courts in San Francisco to have dim sum. And by the way, if you are listening and you are going to San Francisco, you have to go visit Roy's Imperial Tea Courts. It gave me a slice of kind of like Hong Kong experience, Roy. I love the food, and not only do you sell tea, I love the tea things you sell. And we haven't even talked about it, the tea things.
Well, tea is such a big subject,
Yes, it is. And I love the fact that I just let you roll, Roy, and then that's it. We're out of time.
That's a problem with me. You get to talk tea, I talk your ears off.
I'd love it. I'd love it. So we're gonna have to make a second time or a third time, because we are sharing something miraculous about tea that I think most people are not even aware of. The deep, to me, the tea spirit. And you have, in my conversations with you, you have awakened that tea spirit within me. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I would look forward to more conversation. And
Absolutely.
this is only one passion left in my life, and I love to share it. I look at it as almost my duty. You know, tea has been so good to me. At least I can do is to give a little back and let people know how other people can be so enthusiastic, you know, about this one magic plan, you know, and you don't even have to get arrested to get high. You know, just water and tea, you could get high.
So one liner to button this entire talk, Roy. Um, what is the one thing tea taught you? If you have to put
I said earlier, be like water, be like tea.
tea,
You know, I
that's
think
beautiful.
it says all.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roy.
All
I
right. Thank
appreciate
you.
your time and your sharing. And thank you, my fellow tea master, tea person. You have a fabulous weekend.
Tea person. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
That's all for this episode. I really enjoyed sharing this cuppa with you. For tea flowed between us, bestowing her wisdom in the leaves. Remember, it's not about the tea you drink, but the spirit you bring to your tea drinking. Thank you all for listening. Until the next enchantee, may the tea spirit embrace you. To join the Nine Dragons Tea Society, visit ninedragonstea.com.